This episode of Please Explain is sponsored by Aware Super, helping you get more from your future.
From the newsrooms of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, this is Please Explain. I'm Samantha Selinger-Morris. It's Tuesday, August 1st. We're all feeling the pinch these days when we fill up our shopping baskets. The checkout prices can make you do a double take. Maybe you've attributed this to the usual suspects: inflation, getting sucked into buying name brands, or my personal vice, shopping my feelings. But did you know about the marketing practice that convinces us to spend even more than we planned, without us often even being aware of it? It's a so-called dark strategy, known as drip pricing, and it's everywhere. Today, explainer reporter Angus Holland on the psychological tools many companies now use to make us pay more. So Angus, you've been researching drip pricing, and it's a somewhat dubious consumer practice that we've all likely fallen for, although we've probably never heard the name. And you've written that it falls under an umbrella of a phenomenon called dark strategies. So what exactly is drip pricing?
So I guess they call it a dark strategy because it's one of these kind of sneaky ways that companies, people trying to sell you stuff, can upsell you on things and also kind of keep you in the process, so you continue and follow through and check out and don't just browse and then not buy. It's quite subtle. It's kind of giving you a nudge, that they would say. Drip pricing itself, it describes how they basically advertise a certain price. It might seem like a low price, or it might just be what you think is a reasonable price. And then as you go through the checkout process, either there are other charges that come in that you have to pay, like a booking fee on a ticket, or there might be things that come in that are kind of optional. So we've all had that, say, with a budget airline. And there's a bit of an argument around whether that's how sneaky that is, or whether that's just, well, people don't necessarily want to pay for a bag. But, there's an expectation, I think, of some things when you buy an airline ticket. And I think one of those things until recently was that you could choose your seat. And now, of course, you have to pay for that. So they're atomizing anything that they can get you to pay for, so they can put this low price at the front. And then you go through the process and that $600 airfare is suddenly $900. And maybe it's double that for two people, and suddenly you're like, I don't feel so great about this now.
And so this is so prevalent now, this strip pricing. I think you've really captured this dicey trend quite perfectly, because you write, for an extra $30, the joke goes, they'll even send your luggage to the same airport you're flying to. But actually, as you reveal, it's not a joke, because this practice, depending on how it's deployed and where, it's designed to prey on our subconscious biases to some degree. So how does it do that? What strategies do companies use to entice us to act against our own best instincts?
Yeah, you've heard of the sunk cost fallacy, which is that because you feel you've already invested some of your time and effort, you're going to waste that if you then stop that process and start anew somewhere else. Maybe you look for a different website that does a similar thing. I think that getting you in at the first place with what looks like a good price, whether that's for a hotel room that says from $180 a night, that seems, I can afford that. Or, that flight to Singapore that's advertised on the site as, from $549, and you go, yeah, okay, I could do that. And then you start the process of actually searching for the dates, talking to your partner about when you're going to go, and then starting to do the booking, and then adding on those extras. In the case of a flight, the bag, the seat, do you want a fare that you can get a refund on, all that sort of stuff. And then during that process, they want your passport, your name, your address. So all this stuff takes time. So what that is you've got this initial price in your mind still. Yeah, I've got a pretty good deal. You're investing your own time and effort. And then by the time you've kind of got to the final price, which is going to be, several $100s more, you're kind of possibly expecting that, but I'm always a bit surprised how much more it is. At that point, the psychology is that you're kind of semi-committed, and you go, all right, I'll just go through with it. I'll just eat it.
And there was one psychological tool that you wrote about, which is the possibly not authentic scarcity. So there's only 2 left in stock. Tell me a bit about that.
I think it depends how cynical you are. I'm pretty cynical about this stuff, and I think there's no way you can tell if there's only 2 of those things left. And in the story, I quoted a guy saying, well, you know, maybe they're not in the actual storeroom, but maybe they're in the truck outside the warehouse, or they're on the way to the warehouse, so they're not in stock. And you know, there's no way of telling. I feel that's just probably just one of these nice little techniques. And look, airplanes are the same. Only 5 seats left. Book now. I'm going to miss out. And then there's a countdown clock, in which you do see on ticketing sites. It's in your basket. You've got 20 minutes to make up your mind, or it might be vanished, might be gone. You might miss out.
You had another example which absolutely was just boggled my mind, which I don't think it came to fruition, but you wrote that in 2009, discount European airline Ryanair considered charging passengers an additional £1 to use the toilet, which sort of brings me to this question of, I mean, that doesn't even sound like it would be lawful. I don't know. I mean, that would sound like it would sort of contravene some sort of basic human rights. So when does this, or does it, ever sort of go into the illegal territory?
Well, just back on the Ryanair one, I did a bit more digging, and it turned out that what they were actually trying to do was get rid of toilets so they could put more seats in. And they figured, because it's such a discount airline, that people were going to be really cheap about the whole experience. And I've seen this on cheap airlines too. People are really reluctant to pay for anything once they've got the cheap fare. So they wanted to get rid of either, I think, I can't remember exactly, I think they have 3 toilets on board, whatever plane it was, and they thought they could get rid of 2 of them. If people knew they had to pay, they would obviously go beforehand or wait, and then they could put in 6 more seats and charge them for the seats.
We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Scott Hayward, and with me from Aware Super is Peter Hogg, Head of Advice Experiences and Enhancements. Peter, what are some of the simple yet important things people can do today to get more from their super?
Well, Scott, whether you're 25 or 55, it's worth spending a little time now to know where your hard-earned money is going. It's things like making sure all your super is in one fund. Chances are, if you have more than one fund, you're paying multiple sets of fees. Also, knowing how your super is invested, if it's right for your age, and asking that all-important question, is your fund performing well over the long term? Finally, make sure you take advantage of any help that your fund offers. Aware Super offers help and education via their website at no extra cost.
Thanks, Peter. Some small steps today can make a big difference to your retirement. With super advice and super returns, Aware Super is super helpful. For more information about Aware Super, including their PDS and CMD, visit aware.com.au.
So Angus, to be clear, this is massive business for all the companies that do employ drip pricing, because even though sometimes these add-ons are maybe $1 and a bit, they're making massive money. You do have some remarkable figures in your piece. You've got that the White House apparently estimates that airline baggage and change fees totaled $5.97 billion in 2021 alone, which is a bit staggering. Yeah. And that in Canada, there was a regulator there that took legal action against several companies, including a cinema chain. And it turns out all those extra dollars for individual customers generated nearly $17 million. So they're definitely winning here, I feel like.
That's right. That was in 9 months. So they put on whatever it was, like a $1.50 booking fee, and they raised an extra $20 million. And I bet they didn't put down the price of the tickets. So that was just free money for them. Their argument is that $1.50 is just like an extra service for people who want to reserve their seats. But you're welcome to go to the cinema and just pay over the counter for free. So that's their kind of loophole.
And so drip pricing became popular about 10 years ago, but its impact on us now is arguably more pronounced given the current cost of living crisis that we're in. And it's even been enough to garner the attention of presidents and prime ministers. So what have we heard from them on this issue?
Yeah, that's one reason why I kind of dipped into this topic this week. The most recent was Rishi Sunak in the UK. He's announced an inquiry into drip pricing, which they call the most pernicious form of kind of internet skullduggery. And I think what's happened is that him and President Joe Biden, they're under pressure to do something about cost of living because of inflation. And I think this is a way that they can kind of push back and chip away and be seen to be doing something.
My State of the Union address outlined our fight against junk fees, to end junk fees. These hidden charges that companies sneak into your bill to make you pay more without you really knowing it initially.
I also think Joe Biden has a real kind of personal bee in his bonnet about this stuff.
Junk fees are not a matter for the wealthy very much, but they're a matter for working folks like the homes I grew up in. And they can add hundreds of dollars a month and make it harder for families to pay their bills. I think it's just wrong.
He's been quite angry about airlines charging families to choose their seats on planes. The alternative being that you can be there with your kids and suddenly they're miles and miles away from you if you don't want to pay. So he's tried to stamp that out.
One of the major categories of junk fees are ones that companies charge right at the end of the purchasing process, after you've already spent the time comparing your options. The solution is what is called all-in pricing.
And I guess that's a good example of the kind of some of the grey areas in drip pricing. That the airline would say, no, it's totally it's legal what we're doing because it's not mandatory that you pay for the seat. But I guess as a parent, it is, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission has had a handful of major wins against drip pricing practitioners that it says has changed the ground rules. So what sort of actual crackdown has there been on drip pricing? And what advanced protections, if any, have we consumers won?
I mean, they've had a few cases against airlines. They were successful against AirAsia, I believe. And then they had a big win against Jetstar and Virgin in 2015 in court. And that was over a service fee or booking fees for credit card transactions, which was stuck on at the very end of the checkout. Which is why I think you do see much more often, quite prominently on booking sites, that there will be a credit card surcharge added, and you see that on the first page. The other one was they took Palace Cinemas to task over a booking fee, I guess, that had been dripped in late in the process. And I was surprised about the comments from the ACCC's chairman, how kind of slightly not delighted he was. He said it had resulted in some improvements in how cinemas sold their tickets. So I thought, okay, this is going to be a bit of an ongoing battle for all of them, I think.
Right. And you also write that AI has been a real obstacle in this arena, that companies can now use it to exploit loopholes. So how do they use AI to do that, which I imagine enhances the likelihood that we will be duped or, just reluctantly accept these charges with great annoyance?
We don't really know how AI is working in this field yet. I haven't talked to a couple of marketing and kind of behavioural economists, but they're saying one way it's definitely being used is A/B testing, so showing one group of customers one version of a page, another group another page, and constantly changing that and seeing how well people respond and tweaking it and fine-tuning it, kind of what it looks like, what the buttons are, what the colours are, that sort of stuff. And I guess AI will help them predict how people are going to behave by analysing a whole lot of interactions. So I think there's the law, and I think the law is probably pretty difficult to implement. I've heard this from the UK, which is one reason why they're trying to put this inquiry through. They've tended over there to call companies out and then reach like a private arrangement with them rather than having to haul them through the courts and prove that they have misled customers. So you'd have to find customers who were misled and give evidence and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty hard because it is about psychology. So they're trying to get it simplified where they can kind of go to a court and just show them the site and say, look, if it looks like a duck and it quacks, it's a duck, rather than having to, on the balance of probabilities that it was drip pricing. So, and then you've got companies figuring out all sorts of ways to kind of stay on the right side of the law or not trigger an action or figure out a loophole.
Okay, so I guess to wrap up, what chance do you think regulators have of stamping out this practice in the future?
Yeah, I think worldwide there's a bit of a spectrum about how regulators have figured this out. So Canada have, last year they brought in an actual specific law that talked about drip pricing, and they've been pretty aggressive about chasing companies up about that. Here it's fallen more generally under kind of misleading practice and in consumer law, and they sometimes call it component pricing here. That's probably been a term that's been used a bit more often in the past, but the ACCC has been pretty successful, I think, in those cases that I mentioned, in terms of setting a bit of a precedent and encouraging companies to at least try to do the right thing, or to signal that you're going to be given another fee, or to signal there's going to be a credit card surcharge, even if they don't not necessarily able to calculate it, rather than hiding it till the very end. So I think in Australia we're doing pretty well. Clearly the US and the UK are way behind the ball.
Thank you so much, Angus, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Today's episode of Please Explain was produced by Hannah Mills-Turbot and Julia Carr-Katzel, with technical assistance by Cormac Lally. Our executive producer is Ruby Schwartz. Please Explain is a production of The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. If you enjoy the show and want more of our journalism, subscribe to our newspapers today. It's the best way to support what we do. Search The Age or smh.com.au/subscribe. I'm Samantha Selinger-Morris. This is Please Explain. Thanks for listening.
This episode of Please Explain was brought to you by Aware Super. With super advice and super returns, Aware Super is super helpful. For more information about Aware Super, including their PDS and TMD, visit aware.com.au.